Monday marks the 50th anniversary of the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald. We have spent this week sharing some of the stories from that night through the eyes of northern Michigan. Few people had a closer eye on those growing waves on Lake Superior than Michael Padisak. As a 19-year-old, that was part of his job with the Coast Guard while stationed on a tiny little rock in Lake Superior the night the Fitzgerald passed by.
Well, when we graduated from our technical school, they put all of our names up on all the duty stations up on a board, and you could pick from those whichever one you wanted based on your ranking in the class. And so that was left, and I picked Rock of Ages light station.
And that's how, in 1975, 19-year-old Mike Padisak found himself surrounded on every side by the waters of Lake Superior.
Actually off the southern end of Isle Royale National Park, I think it's about 5 or 8 miles or something like that.
A tall lighthouse on the tiniest pieces of land.
You can imagine taking a spark plug and screwing it into a piece of rock sticking out. That's kind of what it looks like.
Mike and 2 other Coast Guardsmen would spend 28 days at a time here, making sure the passing freighters knew where to go and where not to.
We had a foghorn we'd have to turn on when the visibility got so low. Of course, turn the light on every night, or every afternoon, whenever.
And the lighthouse sent out a radio signal the vessels could use to triangulate their position to keep them en route.
They would be kind of off in the distance, We'd see them going by, probably 10, 15 miles away or maybe more, I don't know. But that was one of their routes when they would take the more northern route across the top of Lake Superior.
A couple of months into his service on the Rock in early November 1975, the weather started to turn.
That day was kind of a culmination of a weather system that had been developing for some time, and the wind started blowing maybe a day or two before that, as I remember. And the waves just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then, of course, that night it really started blowing.
The winds kept pushing the water higher and higher, the waves rising, and so were the concerns for the mariners they knew were out on it.
The waves at our lighthouse were probably 20, maybe 25 feet at the most, but further down they got bigger, I think 30 or more. Down by where the Fitzgerald sunk.
Waves, one after another, and winds that just didn't stop.
Roaring all the time. And, we would send our weather into Duluth every 2 hours and give them wind speed and wave height, direction, and things like that. And I remember going down and watching the wind speed indicator, and it would be sitting right on 50 knots. And then it would gust up to 70 and then back to 50 knots. So it was just like, whatever a knot is, 1.2 miles per hour. So on top of that, 80-mile-an-hour winds.
At 19, not much scared Mike. While the weather was wicked, he knew his lighthouse and the vessels passing by had been through worse. Still, he picked up a different tone and tenor of the radio traffic from vessels as the storm built.
And I could hear the freighters talking back and forth, on the radio. And so I knew things were getting pretty bad out there as far as the wave height and the storm was going. So, yeah, I was pretty glad I was on a lighthouse and not on one of those boats.
The captains of those boats radioing what they were seeing out there, until one of them reporting what he couldn't see anymore.
The ship that was behind him called in and said, I had his lights in sight, but I don't see him anymore.
The Fitzgerald seemingly vanishing.
It just happened that fast. It was like they were talking about things, and then all of a sudden it was gone. It was like, well, what happened?
Equally fast, the call for help coming across the radio.
And they send out, they call it a PAN message or PON message, and they come across that channel 23 and say, PON, PON, PON. The 729-foot motor vessel Edmund Fitzgerald is believed sinking 15 miles off Chris Point, and then they go through the whole thing about, any vessels in the area, please respond or whatever, you know. And so that, when that started, it was kind of like, oh yeah, it's really serious, you know.
No freighter close enough in these conditions, and no hope that help would come from the skies.
You know, of course, the aircraft that they could send out, you know, the winds were blowing so hard, I don't think they could have launched any helos from Traverse City. That's where they would have came from.
Clinging on every word from the radio and clinging to hope, cloaked in disbelief.
You still think that, well, you know, maybe they had something happen where they had to get out, you know, go into a shore, closer to shore or something, but you just can't hardly believe that they're gone like that just that fast. That, you know, you'd think that something that big and that had been around for that long could weather any storm.
But as the storm faded, so did that hope.
Probably the next day they were able to get some search and rescue stuff going, and they couldn't find anything of the ship, you know. I mean, it was just nothing there. And so they pretty much surmised that the thing had gone down, you know, with everyone on board.
Isolated on an island, dependent on the squawk from a speaker for the news that never came.
I think everybody kind of assumed that that's what had happened, you know, but nobody really came out and said it. But I think everybody pretty much knew that it had, you know.
50 years later, and not a November's gone by that Mike isn't right back on that island, back hearing those radio messages, feeling that wind and the weather, and reliving that night when the Fitz was lost.
Every year about this time, I start thinking about that day and that whole week, really, and what happened, you know, to those guys out there. And you know, every time I hear that song by Gordon Lightfoot, it kind of gives me chills, you know, to think about what happened that night. And yeah, so yeah, it's just something I never forget, you know.
And on Monday, you can watch our special report on the anniversary on our UpNorthLive YouTube page at 7 p.m. We'll look back on the Edmund Fitzgerald life and its legacy.